This is Metro Week. Our top story, the propositions on the Tucson election ballot. We'll hear from the man who heads a long-time effort to ban traffic cameras in the city. We'll also find out why one group thinks the city charter needs to be updated. Then our Journalists Roundtable analyzes the week's news.
Welcome to Metro Week. I'm Andrea Kelly. Ballots will go to those on the early voting list in Tucson in less than 3 weeks. In addition to city council candidates, there are 4 ballot questions. We'll focus on those in today's program, beginning with a voter initiative that draws strong emotions in Tucson. Photo radar, traffic cameras, electronic speed enforcement. No matter how you say it, a conversation about this can turn heated. The traffic systems that detect speeding or red light running take a photo of the suspected driver and vehicle, and then, after an officer checks it and verifies it, the offender is mailed a citation. Accused drivers can challenge the ticket in court or pay a fine. For years, one group has been trying for a public vote to ban photo enforcement. The state stopped using it on highways, and Pima County took its photo systems off of unincorporated roads. But Tucson has expanded the number of intersections at which cameras detect red light runners. Now, voters will decide on Proposition 201. It's a yes-no question on banning the cameras. A yes vote would eliminate them. A no vote would keep them. We turn now to the arguments. There's no formal opposition to the initiative to ban traffic cameras in Tucson. The key person behind the effort to get rid of them is John Kromko. He's a former state lawmaker and longtime city gadfly. He tried previously to get a vote on banning traffic cameras in Tucson. He joined me in the studio this week to explain why he wanted voters to decide the fate of photo radar. Let's just start at the very beginning. What are the main reasons you would like to ban the red light cameras?
The reason is because they're a scam. They're unfair. I was in the legislature years ago, and it used to be that when you crossed the crosswalk, you were in the intersection, and you crossed the crosswalk before the right light turned, you didn't get a ticket. And everybody understood that. There was a company came in and lobbied, and I helped defeat this a couple of years, to move the line out about 30 feet.
Into the intersection?
Yeah, and it failed because people said, why would you want to do that? And finally, after I left the legislature, it passed. And why it was is because I could run these cameras. When this passed, put us out of compliance with federal standards, out of compliance with every other state, and we moved the line out. So the purpose of it was to have, to give people tickets, because people who were doing what they had always been doing suddenly became red light runners. And I did a little YouTube video I hope people will look at. It's under my name, Kromko, Kromko, and red light. And it's not professional or anything, but I explained how this came about. And okay. I hope people will look at it. So it's very unfair. About 80% of the violations are what we call micro violations, where people are 0.03 of a second late getting to that line. It's no threat to public safety at all. And if a police officer were standing right there, he wouldn't even be able to see that. He wouldn't be able to tell that it was a violation.
Now, your initiative would ban the red light cameras.
Yes.
Does it also ban the photo radar that's on the side of a road that just looks for speeding? All of it?
Yeah, that's another thing. Those vans, if you look at the license plate, are private vehicles. And they're painted up to look like police vehicles. And they're not. And the county wouldn't allow this red light camera company to do that. But our city sold out the police department and the city council for money. They let these guys paint these vans up as if they were police vans.
Now let me ask you, there's no formal opposition to this initiative, but the city says that these photo radar, the vans and also the intersection cameras make those places safer and that people are less likely to have a repeat offense. Can you respond to that?
I felt so sad I saw that the other day. They had a report and it said Tucson Police Department. I worked at 6 street fairs getting tickets, getting signatures here. And there are hundreds of officers there at the street fair walking up and down. And I must say that every one of them and who expressed an opinion was opposed to the cameras. They know that that is not correct, that it destroys people's support for the police to have these violations because it's a scam. They like I said, about 80% of them are places where people miss the line that they have to cross by 300ths of a second or 500ths. It's why we had people do this, get signatures, because it's so unfair and unjust. If you're trying to turn left, and that's what happened to me. I tried to turn left, and the car in front of me stopped. So I went down, I told the judge I didn't intend to break the law. The car in front of me stopped, and I couldn't do anything. $400. $400. See, if he had said $50, we probably wouldn't have this. But it's so devastating, the amount of money. Some people pay more. And so that's why we're doing it. It's unfair, and it's a scam. There's no survey anywhere in this country, an independent survey, that shows an increase in reduction in accidents.
But the police departments that use these say that they can show a reduction in accidents.
Yeah, it's just a bogus. If you look at that, you have no idea where those numbers came from. It doesn't say how they did it. It doesn't say what standards they used or what comparative intersections. You know, traffic accidents are down in the whole country, and they don't mention that. So there's no control. It's a made-up survey by this company feeding the police department something. And whoever invented this was brilliant, because there's money in it for the police, for the city, for the courts. Can you imagine? The judges attend training sessions put on by the camera company.
In fact, the city actually says that $2.4 million is how much money came into the general fund, police, and the court funds in one fiscal year.
Who cares about the people, say? Who's in this to protect the citizens? When you say, okay, police, here, police, you're getting paid off, judges are being paid off, the city's being paid off, who is it that will stand up for the citizens? Apparently not any city council members or the police. You can't blame the police. They're getting plenty of money, and the judges too. So it's so unjust. There's nobody will care for the citizen and say, wait, this guy got to the line 300ths of a second too late. There's no threat to safety. There's nothing. And like in my case, I turned left okay eventually, but I got a ticket, and I shouldn't have got a ticket. It's no intent to break the law. People have the idea that there's these crazed speeders blazing through it. You know, those people don't get caught by these. That's not what this is. It's people turning left, people turning right.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Now we'll turn to the 3 questions the City Council referred to the ballot. The Council agreed to send these issues to voters, but that does not necessarily mean the City Council supports all the items. 3 propositions on the ballot come from committees the City Council created to suggest changes in city governance. The Charter Review Committee spent months talking about numerous ways the city could make small tweaks or overhaul the charter. The document is like the Constitution of the city. It dictates how government functions and who's responsible for what. The committee made recommendations to the City Council, and the Council put 2 items on the ballot. Proposition 403 is meant to change the mayor's voting power. It would allow each member of the council, including the mayor, equal voting ability during council meetings. Now the mayor is restricted from voting on every issue. Proposition 404 would change the hiring and firing process for most city department directors. If approved, it would mean most administrative level positions, such as department heads, would be appointed and removed by the city manager. The third ballot question is Proposition 405, which would give city council members and the mayor raises of about 15%. Tucson voters have historically turned down salary increases for the council. The positions are considered part-time, and many people retain another job while they serve on the council. On all of these questions, a yes vote would change the system, and a no vote would keep it the same. The Southern Arizona Leadership Council is one of the groups supporting changes to the city charter. There's no formal opposition to those ballot referendums. We asked supporter Steve Lynn to explain the ballot questions and why he thinks voters should favor them. Let's begin with a little more explanation and detail about the expansion of mayoral power, that proposal. Why is that on the ballot?
Well, the issue here is bringing the mayor up to the same level as the rest of the city council. In the charter that was developed in 1929, the mayor was actually disadvantaged in terms of voting. The mayor doesn't even count toward a quorum when the mayor and council get together. So what this change would do is elevate the mayor's voting status to the same as the rest of the city council. He or she can vote on hiring or firing as the city council does, and can vote on all matters and will count toward a quorum. So this is a change that is a long time in coming, but it's really important to have the person who's nominated and elected citywide, have the same voting authority as the rest of the city council.
Now, do you think this goes far enough? I mean, some people might argue for an even stronger mayor system where there's more mayoral power than equal votes.
Yeah, the debate about strong mayor has been going on for a long time, Andrea, as you know, in the community, and it's one that will continue to go on. The charter really does not speak to that. In fact, the city is really set up to have a council manager form of government where the city council makes policy, but the city manager is really the chief administrator for the city of Tucson. It would take a substantial change to change that around. That's not on the ballot this year, but if in the future the city feels that a strong mayor would be advantageous, they could go that direction.
Okay, and then the second question is to make most department heads hired and fired by the same process. Why is that one necessary?
Well, right now there's sort of a patchwork of how department heads in the city are hired and or fired. And some are voted on by the city council, some are decided only by the manager, and some it's a hybrid. So what this does is clarify the fact that the city manager really is the chief administrator, that most department heads, other than the city attorney and the city clerk, work directly for the city manager, and that he or she needs to have the authority to hire them and also to terminate them should that be necessary. It's a control issue. It's an issue about enforcement of efficient and effective government, and it's a matter of accountability. We think that's important to have those who work directly for the city manager be directly accountable to the city manager.
And just to be clear on this one, there's also no mechanism that allows the council to weigh in at any point on these hiring.
Well,
and firings?
some of the hiring is done with the advice and consent of the council. They don't really vote on it, but they have the opportunity to present the city manager with objections should they have any. The other thing it does is it removes the civil service process from the termination of department heads. Now, most city employees are covered by civil service, and it's an important stopgap, if you will, or a check and balance in terms of a city employee being terminated or unfairly dealt with, and so they have an appeal process. But in this instance, where you have a department head, a very, very highly ranking and highly compensated individual who's in charge of an entire city department, that protection is really not necessary, and the city manager should have the ultimate authority without fear of being overturned later.
Now, why does this need to go to a public vote as opposed to just city council changing these hiring practices?
Well, this charter, which most people aren't even aware exists, was established in 1929. And in 1929, the city of Tucson had about 35,000 people. Today, we are over 540,000 as a community. That charter, which set up the structure for city government, has remained virtually unchanged since 1929. So earlier this year, the mayor and council decided that they would impanel a group of citizens to take a look at the charter, make recommendations as to how to update it. We don't say that this is so much amending the charter as it is updating it to reflect the modern city of Tucson and the way it ought to be governed. Now, these two measures seem small, but they are part of an ongoing study of the charter, and there will be other changes that will be recommended in the future. These two were unanimously recommended by the citizens group and unanimously recommended to the voters by the mayor and council. So there's no dissension on the part of the group that studied it, and no dissension on the part of the council that these two are very important.
Now, you've mentioned that some of the other issues might come up in future ballots in future years. What are some of those, and why aren't they on the ballot this time?
Well, you mentioned one earlier. That's the kind of strong mayor discussion that may happen. Some of the other issues that have been brought up but haven't gotten to the place where they're ready to be voted on, things like ward-only elections, where we have kind of a hybrid system where the members of the city council are nominated by ward, but they're elected citywide. We're one of the very few cities that has that methodology. Most cities have a ward-only structure or an at-large structure where everybody's elected at large. But in a ward-only structure, the council member knows exactly who the constituents are at all times, and it's that ward who both nominates and elects the members of the council.
Like the Pima County Board of Supervisors, for
Just
example.
like the county board, they have districts that are set, so they're nominated and elected in those districts. So that's an issue. There's also an issue of expansion of the council. If annexation is successful in the city of Tucson, certainly there might be room for an expanded city council, because right now each city council member represents over 80,000 citizens, and that's a huge number of people to service, if you will, from their ward offices with a very limited staff. So it's a difficult job, city council, and it's a job that may require some tweaking as we go forward.
Now, we couldn't find any organized opposition to these measures, but we do know that there is a proponent committee, and the Southern Arizona Leadership Council is in favor of these. Explain that support.
Yeah, Southern Arizona Leadership Council has been working with the city on charter change for a number of years. And we have a number of our members who are engaged in the process and have been active in trying to put these measures on the ballot. So we are very supportive of these two changes, absolutely. We're also supportive that the mayor and the city council have said that they would pull this group back together to continue the work of charter review and to move it forward in the future.
Steve Lynn, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lorraine Rivera. Tonight on Arizona Week, more money for schools, but is it as easy as it sounds?
It's a short-term Band-Aid that leaves a long-term scar. It's not more money for schools. It is clearly not more money. It is less money mathematically for schools. It's just sooner money.
Now our journalist roundtable. Joining me in the studio are Dylan Smith of the TucsonSentinel.com and David Rupp-Calvis of Tucson Local Media. Thanks to you both for being here. Now we're going to start with the Suntran news that we got this week. Big deal, the strike is over. Dylan, it took more than 24 hours for us, the public, to get details on what exactly happened to end that strike, or how the strike ended with the negotiations. Even the city council did not know what the deal entailed, but now we know. Can you explain it to us?
Well, we don't have all of the details. We have a little bit more, and hopefully throughout the day Friday, after, unfortunately, we're filming this, that we'll get even more details. But what we do know as of this point is that the strike is settled. It's a $4.3 million deal, which stretches over 2 years. And basically, the extra money that made the deal happen came from the strike savings, the fact that the buses weren't running and the drivers weren't getting paid during the strike, and fuel savings that have come in mostly this year and a little bit projected into the future, with fuel costs running so much lower than they had budgeted for. And that's about $800,000 for each of those slices of the pie, you might say. So that's what made the deal happen. And it includes raises for all of the Suntran workers between 30 cents an hour to up to $5 an hour for some of them. And each worker is also going to get a $3,000 lump sum payment within a week of this settlement, basically to make up for what they missed when they were out on strike.
I think that sounds pretty good for all of them. You know, the key is their buses are running, People are getting on them. They're moving around town. You know, they started yesterday at 4 a.m. I still saw them out at 11, so it's good for Tucson that it's over.
One of the things when I talked to riders during the strike, people who were displaced by the strike, they were saying they really liked how the system ran before the strike. They were frustrated with the strike, but they liked the service they were getting before that. So we hope that that's really how it came back. But so we're still waiting to find out what exactly those raises were, which pay scales got
Yeah,
which
we don't
raises.
know that at this point.
Just we know the range.
The ongoing costs, I talked to City Manager Mike Ortega this morning, and the ongoing cost after these savings are used up is about $1.4 million a year to account for these raises. And they're going to, Suntran, the management company, and the Teamsters are going to work together to try to find some efficiencies in the system, in the operations, especially looking at the way they maintain things, and try and bring down some of the costs in those areas to try and make up for that. The deal also includes a chance for workers to get additional pay bumps based on some of the efficiencies that they can find in the system.
David, what was the impact of this strike on businesses?
Pretty big. You know, and a lot of it depended on where you were. You know, a lot of businesses rely on bus transportation to get shoppers to and from. A lot of them rely on buses to get their workers there. You know, if you don't have employees, it makes it a real challenge. There are a lot of people that lost their jobs because they couldn't get to work. You know, you can't just take 6 weeks off. You know, they have to find someone to replace you. You know, a lot of businesses in the downtown area and in areas that are more congested with little parking, they have to have buses to get people to and from. So there was a pretty big impact.
And Dylan, some city council members have talked about actually getting rid of the management company that runs Suntran. It's called TransDev. It also does business as Professional Transit Management, and we tend to just call it Suntran.
Yeah.
So those are the interchangeable terms we're talking here. What do we know about that so far? Will the council vote to get rid of that contract?
Basically, there needs to be some sort of management entity that is outside of the city. About 30% of Suntran's budget comes from federal grants that are pretty much dependent on workers having the right to strike. And under the city charter, city workers do not have the right to strike, which is why we need to have this sort of arm's length transaction between how the bus system operates and the city. In order to make sure that we, keep that revenue stream coming in. That's a huge portion of Suntran's budget. So there are a number of city council members who, at various points over the last several years, have recommended, or at least floated the idea of moving towards a more regional operation. Councilman Paul Cunningham put that out there about 5 years ago, and it kind of fell flat at that point. Now you've got a whole lot more of people on the council who are saying we need to at least have a serious discussion about that. Steve Kozacek and Regina Romero are each been pushing that idea over the past several weeks.
And so has Mayor Rothschild also expressed support for that. What would that take? Turning the system from a city system into a regional system in terms of funding and management, what would that take?
That would really depend on the specifics of how you wanted it to work. A number of people have floated the idea of turning it over to the Regional Transportation Authority and having them run it. That doesn't quite fit into their current mandate, but you could probably find a way to make that function. Or start up another regional entity and turn it over to them. It would really give the chance to possibly expand operations even more outside the city. There's right now limited Suntran service outside the city of Tucson.
And it would remove the political liability from the city.
Well, the direct political
directly,
liability.
yeah. So that's another question. Now that the strike is over, are voters going to remember this when they're voting on their ballots that come in the mail in October or at the ballot box in November, or is it in the rearview mirror?
I'm not quite sure. It really depends on how much the Republican challengers try and use this to continue to hammer against the Democratic incumbents who are running again. And it has been kind of an unusual situation. You don't often find Republicans really promoting the idea of publicly subsidized transit as a fundamental part of government. And that's generally something they're trying to cut. And they've been, really trying to, use this as a tool to hammer against the Democrats. And so we'll see if they stick with that message or if they let it drop.
I think the challengers are going to stick with it, but I think it's probably going to fall flat. I think the emphasis you saw on the city council in the last few weeks to get this settled was a lot to protect the incumbents. You know, there's 4 of them running for office. The mayor obviously is unopposed, but the other 3 were probably getting scared. So I think the emphasis to get it done and get it done quickly probably was from that. But now that I think it's done and the buses are running, it'll probably go away pretty quick. You know, within a week, we're going to stop talking about it. The news will stop talking about it. The voters will forget.
Well, I'll move on.
It looks like the settlement is not going to cost the city that much more out of pocket, at least for the, you know, especially for the term of the contract, which is 2 years. After that, we'll see what sort of budget impact it might have. But it's not like a whole lot more money was thrown into the pot by the city.
Now, sticking with elections, shifting a little bit away from Suntran, we've been covering the ballot questions in this show, and I'm curious why you think there's no opposition to any of the elements the questions that people will vote on. Why is there not the other side?
Well, for one of them, it's kind of hard to promote the idea of, hey, we want to give people more traffic tickets. That's, you know, really not ever a popular move. So even though there are people who think that the red light cameras are a good idea and that they improve safety at the intersections where we've installed them, and a lot of statistics seem to show that, it's really hard to go out there and, you know, push that idea. So even though the group that is behind the effort to get rid of them has been fairly haphazard at times, it seems like that's something that's going to be pretty popular with voters. With the other ones, you're looking at some, you know, what most people would probably think of as fairly trivial amendments to the city charter. Basically, who gets to vote on what, who gets to hire and fire who. You know, if you're in one of those positions and your boss is changing, in essence, if those go through, that's probably a more serious question. But for most folks, that's something that is not, you know, the kind of issue that gets you worked up.
I want to touch on the salary increase question because we didn't talk about it much previously in the show. Why did the City Council oppose those increases, and why did they therefore still end up on the ballot?
Well, there's a citizens commission that is empowered to put this question on the ballot. It's not something that is, you know, right there in the city council. And so this group got together, and as they generally do when they review salaries, recommended that we pay the mayor and council more than we do, which is, you know, we don't pay them very much right now at all. It's, you know, if you're a city council person, you get paid $24,000 a year. They recommended a minor pay bump up to $27,000. The mayor gets paid significantly more, but you know, it's still not a huge salary, $40-some thousand a year. It would not be a politically savvy move for anybody on the council to vote to recommend that they get a raise. That's, you know, generally not something that happens. That's why they try and, you know, create this sort of arm's length from the decision and have the commission recommend it and then send it off to voters. But the likelihood of it getting approved, voters have said time and again no to giving these people raises.
And that's also true even when it's the legislature or other levels of government, people always say no.
Yeah.
Now, David, we hear in business communities, always, if you raise the salaries, you're going to attract better candidates. We hear that about management and even lower level positions in the private sector. Does that ring true also when we're talking about government elected candidates?
Absolutely. And that's why Dylan and I both think that this should pass and probably should even go higher, because you can't attract the best people if you're not willing to pay them. The reality is if you're elected to the Tucson City Council or you're elected as the mayor, it becomes a full-time and probably more than a full-time job, and they're not making hardly any money. So you're basically limited to 3 types of people. You get people that are either retired, you get people that own their own businesses, that are successful enough they don't have to be there all the time, or you get people that work for a company that look at it and say, I can actually get a benefit from having someone in that position. But that 95% of the rest of us, we don't have a chance. I have kids at home, I have a wife, I have bills. I couldn't live on $24,000 a year or even $42,000. You know, so it would take second jobs, and a lot of them probably do have second jobs, but it's their minority. Once they're elected, their focus has to become city council. So if you raised it enough, you would certainly get more and probably better candidates.
And it's no reflection on the people who are serving now or the people who are running, but you would certainly widen the number of people who would have not just the desire, but the actual ability to run for offices. And, you know, really the more people you have involved in that, over time, the much better leadership you will have.
That's great.
All right, I want to thank you both for coming in to talk about these issues, and I'm sure we'll revisit some of these again, maybe Suntran one more time. In the coming weeks, we'll also cover the countywide bond election questions and the Oro Valley recall election. In the meantime, find more information about those races and the City Council candidates on our website. Thanks for watching.